Hello there, I'm the Biblical Translator. I'm not translating the Bible today, and I'm not even talking about scriptures. I am going to talk about judgment and how we perceive certain TV programs. The reason I'm going to talk about this program is because I saw an article in the newspaper, and it's about Love Island, and I know Love Island is a program that a lot of Christians don't watch because it's considered for it's got fornication in it. It's got debauchery and all kinds of stuff. I tend to watch it from a place of observation. I tend to like to watch real lives and it playing out and the impact of fast decisions. So I watch it from a learning perspective. But I wanted you to listen to how the Bible touches on things like Love Island. So I called it Fame, Discernment and Care of the Soul. I picked up a newspaper yesterday, and as I scanned through the pages, I saw the headlines: "My Love Island millions are gone. I only have £20 to my name." Those were the words of Jack Fincham. I'm not sure how many Christians watch Love Island because for many it is a secular program that depicts what could be considered debauchery and references to fornication. However, I watch it not from a place of judgment, but from a place of learning about real people, real lives, and impact of fast decisions have on individual lives. So if I was to say Jack Fincham now, you would probably say, who's he? Well, he was the 2018 winner of Love Island. He was an ordinary person who became a celebrity overnight, earning millions. He was the one people rooted for, and he won. So last week when I heard about his struggle, he only has £20 note to his name, I felt disappointed. It shows that success doesn't automatically mean safety. Scripture never pretends that being lifted up quickly is harmless. In fact, it warns the opposite. There is a deep biblical understanding that elevation without formation is dangerous. Not because honour is wrong, but because the soul must be able to carry what the hands receive. The Bible tells us to guard the heart because everything else flows from it. Not reputation, not income, not opportunity. The heart. And when a person is suddenly exposed to praise, criticism, desire, temptation, and pressure all at once, the heart is the first thing put under strain. Jack Fincham didn't just become famous, he became visible, and visibility is not neutral. Scripture shows us this again and again. When people are seen, they are also tested. When they are known, they are also watched. When they are praised, they are also judged. Even Jesus, before beginning his public ministry, was led into the wilderness. Not because the wilderness is punishment, but because exposure without grounding breaks people. The problem is we no longer leave room for the wilderness. We move people straight from obscurity to spotlight, from anonymity to applause, from being unknown to being defined, and then we are surprised when they struggle. Caroline Flack, who was a presenter on Love Island, committed suicide a few years ago. Here was someone accomplished, experienced, admired, and yet crushed under the weight of judgment, scrutiny, and shame played out in public. Scripture is very clear about the power of accusation. It tells us that accusation strips people of dignity, that relentless judgment corrodes the spirit, and that mercy is not weakness, but wisdom. The Bible also reminds us that a bruised reed should not be broken, not trampled, not mocked, not pushed further until it snaps. And yet our culture often does the opposite. We watch cracks form and we call it drama. We see distress and label it failure. We confuse exposure with strength. Many of the young people who step into shows like Love Island carry more than we know. Some carry histories of rejection, some carry wounds from childhood, some carry an ache to be seen, chosen, affirmed. Scripture understands this longing. It tells us that the human heart seeks belonging, seeks love, seeks to know that it matters. But the Bible also warns us not to build identity on applause. It tells us that when praise becomes the foundation, collapse is never far behind. Because praise is unstable, it comes and goes. One day you're lifted up, the next day you're forgotten or torn down. And if your sense of worth is tied to that movement, your inner life never rests. This is why Scripture speaks so often about discernment. Discernment is not judgment, it is clarity. It is the ability to see what is forming you, not just what is happening to you. It asks not only, is this opportunity good, but is my soul ready for it? Jack Fincham's story reminds us that winning does not mean arrival. Scripture is full of people who were crowned before they were ready, anointed before they were prepared, promoted before they were healed, and the cost was always the same: confusion, self-destruction, or collapse. This is the reason the Bible values process. There is a reason it speaks about growth in seasons. There is a reason it warns against haste. Wisdom understands timing, and time is not about ambition, it's about survival. We are told to count the cost before we build, not after. Not when the structure is already cracking, before. But how many young people today are taught to count the cost of fame, to ask what it will demand emotionally, spiritually, relationally, not just what we'll give? And I smiled because I was starting a community interest company for my radio station. And I was rushing last night. And because I rushed, I missed some of the titles and I sent it off and it got rejected. And as I'm reading this and it's saying it warns about haste, it makes me think, should I really be starting that community interest company, or should I still be going doing it privately, having a privately owned radio station until I get on my feet? So I had to stop there. So sorry about that. And this is where honesty becomes difficult, because in a culture that celebrates resilience without teaching regulation, vulnerability feels risky. To admit fragility feels like disqualification. So people say they're fine, they believe they'll manage, and sometimes they do, until something triggers an old wound, a deep fear, a sense of abandonment that was never resolved. Scripture understands triggers, even if it doesn't use that word. It speaks of strongholds, of patterns that rise under pressure, of places in us that react before we think. That's why it tells us to renew the mind, not just control behaviour. Healing is not about looking strong, it's about being whole. What concerns me most is not that people struggle. Scripture expects struggle. What concerns me is how quickly we turn struggle into spectacle, how easily we forget that every public breakdown is rooted in a private battle. The Bible teaches restoration, not disposal. It teaches that when someone stumbles, the response should be gentleness, not gloating, reflection, not ridicule. And yet our public culture often moves on without repair. We take what we want from people and leave them to clean up the aftermath alone. Jack Fincham is still here, and that matters because the Bible is a book that values the living story, not just the finished one. It tells us that failure is not the end, that falling is not the same as being forsaken, that restoration is possible when truth is faced and support is real. And this is where discernment comes back to us, the viewers, the listeners, the witnesses. Scripture reminds us that we are responsible not only for what we do, but for what we endorse, amplify, and consume without question. It tells us to be slow to judge, quick to listen, and careful with our words, because words shape worlds. We don't have to stop enjoying television, but we do have to stop pretending it's consequence-free. We don't have to reject fame, but we do have to tell the truth about it. And we don't have to condemn those who struggle, but we do need to stop acting surprised when unhealed wounds bleed under pressure. The Bible never glorifies exposure without covering. Love covers, wisdom protects, discernment asks better questions, and spiritual maturity recognizes that not only everything that shines is safe to touch. So, we're not calling for an outrage, but reflection, not cancellation, but compassion, not denial, but discernment. to remember that behind every screen, every headline, there's a name we recognise. There is a human being whose heart